Well, I once again got started without remembering to film a video. ShopDog is chilling. And even though this isn't a Pontiac video, their sniper has shown up. So that's a good start. Which means this atomic sitting here is available for use. So that may wind up on the Bent69. That may be the direction we go with that. At least get something going for a while. Now, I've done a little bit of work on this car over the last couple years. Some suspension work and just trying to get it to run. But, you know, it's never been here long enough for me to really dig into the car or do anything. It was always it needed to be somewhere. Earlier this summer, I did the exhaust change and figured out why all the problems were exhibiting there. Well, we've been digging deeper in this project, as as you tend to do, and finally we have. Well, one, I pulled a cover and yanked one of the roller rockers, and then pulled out a 7609, which is a 7.300 inch push rod, which tells me there's a hydraulic roller under there, one of the engine swap ones, because, you know, stock length is a little over 7.8 inches. So if we're a ½ inch shorter, it means we have a taller lifter. So that told me a bunch. And luckily, Bartley was able to actually find a cam card. He hasn't found the rest of the engine build stuff, but he did find a cam card in his computer. And I don't know if you know what you're looking at, but that advertised duration of 308 degrees, 316 degrees, with an actual duration of 246, 254. There is a good reason why we have never been able to get vacuum out of this and why it idles so rich. You know, remember, I mean, we cleaned this only a few hundred miles ago, and look how bad that is. Everything is that way. Well, that's because all of your fuel mixture is going straight out the exhaust, because this cam is not meant for street use. This cam would be perfect on a bracket car. It is way too big. It's the root of half the problems he has with this car. That stupid vacuum pump, just some drivability issues, richness issues. And I talked with him about it. And I think what we're going to do is actually just change the cam to something that still has a mean sound, but is going to play friendly with fuel injection, play somewhat friendly with the brakes. We'll probably still have to have a can, but that's a whole lot better than having to do all of this. You know, we won't go quite as big as the Impala, but just almost. And see if we can grab, you know, 13, 14 inches of vacuum here. And, you know, probably something not unlike what we used in the 383 in Mark's old car. I think I actually have a couple videos, not for the first two engine builds for that, unfortunately. I wasn't doing videos back then. But after he had sold the car to Troy, and I did a Terminator stealth swap. So this is several years ago. And it was hairy edge, but that cam did work pretty well with fuel injection. It was always iffy on the brakes. So, but I think a can would have solved that. You know, every time you close the throttle, you grab some vacuum. So I think the direction we're going to go, and I know all I got to do is pull the radiator, pull all this off. We can pop the intake, swap the cam. But knowing that I don't like that smack on the oil pan, and knowing that there's just leaks everywhere, it's just going to be less work to put this on a stand, drain it out real good, inspect the bearings, because I don't have confidence in the build at this point. And it's very inexpensive, time consuming, but inexpensive for us to just go ahead and get it out, go through it, make sure everything looks good, check the main bearings, check some rod bearings, just make sure everything looks right. Just get a warm feel, because remember, this had the wrong spark plugs in it, you know. I mean, it makes me nervous. I'm really worried about the build, and unfortunately, you know, you just never know what you're getting when you go to a shop. So one thing that'll be nice is not only will we take away some of the issues he has, because his car does sit sometimes with fuel, and he's got a fuel percolation issue I just found out about because of the way his headers run in the fuel line, which is why they ran this fuel line to the outside, which I was confused by. So that was them trying to mitigate the fuel boiling. So I am, when I do run the lines, knowing that this car does sit slow, does normally have a spoiler, which takes away all your airflow on a lowered car and can cause all kinds of heat issues. Ask me how I know on the 67. I took the spoiler off that car. So we're going to buy a bunch of heat shield, and when we run the lines, we will take that all in account. I haven't completely sold myself on the fuel injection swap, but at this point, that's most likely the direction we're going to go. I think it's going to make things a little nicer and easier. As far as the top, talking with him, same problems I have with the top on the black car, you know, just over time, you know, something stiffens up, or, you know, there's some cables that might be too tight, and you got to really manhandle it to get it down. So I'm going to recommend the same answer for him that I'm eventually going to go through, and that's taking it down to Fred and having him rebuild the top. Not a free thing, doesn't happen fast, so you got to really plan around that. Obviously, we're going to replace the carpet. It's too inexpensive not to, and there's so much sun fading on it. Convertibles, you know, that's what you get. It turns out that is part of a security system, so we will be putting that back in. Roll control light sitting there, so that's important to know. The GPS stuff here is just, we're not going to reuse that setup. What we're going to do with his phone cradle, because that is also the interface to his radio, is we're going to do one of the retro sound, probably a Zuma, something along that line, because it's a couple $100. Keep the rest, you know, he's got a big subwoofer and stuff in the back, but by doing that, then he'll be able to Bluetooth from his phone, which means his phone doesn't have to be up on that dash, which I hated it there, so that works great. Yeah, so we're just kind of trying to trim in the expenses. Dakota Digital is obviously got a giant backup on things, so I did go ahead and get the gauges on order because I know it'll be a few months before we get them. So that'll actually line up pretty good because I won't need them for a while, but I figured we better get in the queue. So that is the only thing we do have on order. I have been learning a little bit more about Muncie's, looking at Paul Caglioni's site, and this is actually considered acceptable, so we're going to go with that. So when you look in here, all the dogs look really, really nice. We got her in fourth gear. There we go. So you can see everything looks pretty nice in there. I don't see any funky wear, and he wasn't complaining of grinding, just difficulties getting into first gear. So I think we're going to find a clutch problem. Also, instead of sending this in and spending $300, I'm going to make the little spreader tool and pull it apart, clean it out. If everything looks good, we will order the metal bushings instead of these plastic ones that always fail, and go from there. Obviously, if there's anything worn or gone, or if the gates are oblong in any way, you know, we'll have to deal with that, you know. But I think we'll be able to clean that up, and I think that's going to also help. The other thing we're obviously going to do is pull each bolt one by one, replace them with a better bolt, properly seal them. No point in, the mid plate doesn't leak. I really don't want to crack the case, so we're going to deal with that. tail shaft did leak. We're going to change that, especially since it's out and they're not expensive. This isn't leaking currently, but I think we're still going to crack it and put a new gasket on it since it's out and it is a common leak area. All the leaks on this transmission really were coming out of the cover, which is weird because they should be blind, but sometimes they're drilled through a little. So we'll deal with that. I haven't figured out what the metal was from, but that could just be new gears wearing in. But I don't see any weird crowning. The cluster it looks pretty good. You know, I was really worried about that bearing sound there, but in more research on these Muncies, that is a typical sound. So, you know, obviously, you know, you don't work on 4-speeds very often for some of us. And the transmissions I'm considerably more familiar with are, you know, your T56s, and this wouldn't fly, you know. But, yeah, this is a different critter. So, but it's just a machine. It's nothing complicated. I know that there's some roller bearings down there that are really, really not fun. They're little needles. So, but, you know, the shaft doesn't leak. Reverse did work. So I think we're going to live with it. The other nice thing is whether this is the right ratio or not, since we're going to go, oh yeah, and that leaks like a sieve. So we will clean that up. But then we will have our Dakota Digital VSS sender. So we'll be able to clean all that up and not have to deal with the cable all around. So that's just a little less crap under the car to go bad. You can see these, there should not be that much play at all. You know, the 1.2 has got a lot of play in it too. Reverse, a lot of play. And I think instead of these cheesy aftermarket setups here, I'm going to try to adapt the 68 Camaro factory style switch for reverse. It doesn't look like it's going to be that much work. You know, it's not going to be, you know, just drop in, because obviously, you know, this isn't the same. But I think, oh my God, it's hardened, so it's not going to be fun. But I think with some patience and wasting a bunch of drill bits and maybe buying a drill press, because at some point I'm going to have to, I think I can make a linkage hole here to work with the factory 67, 68 style for the Camaro. And that would be ideal, because this is always going to do this. It's always going to get smacked. It's always going to be a problem. You know, this one completely broke. Misadjusted, I'm certain. But I don't like that. These cars, because, you know, 69 later and you had to have the locking steering column. This actually has a rod that goes up and shifts the column a little bit to tell you when you're in reverse and park. And because we don't have that, yeah, because remember, you had to leave them in reverse to get your key out back then. Because we don't have that, and with headers, that's almost impossible to make work out. We run into this problem. So instead of dealing with that and using the switch at the base of the column, I think we can make that work. I've got to find out just how worn these are. There's definitely some wear here. I haven't found a spec yet to look at, but you can feel they're pretty knife edgy right here. They definitely, you can feel them. And I'm wondering if, you know, if that's been one of his issues. So I will see if I can find an actual spec for these dimensions and measure them. But, you know, the combs look good. But you know how that goes. It's possible that, especially without the front stop, that we were pushing past the combs and still putting too much stress on the shift forks. So I will try to find that information out. But I think for today, I'm just going to continue pulling some more things out of the car, getting stuff out of the way. May or may not get the carpet today, but I'm obviously in the middle of pulling this header because this one comes out pretty reasonably easy. So we'll get that one out. This one, I've got to pull some other stuff before it comes out. But if I do a little here and a little there, we'll get there. I haven't drained coolant yet, so I'm not getting too crazy. But now that I've decided that, which I already knew, if you're going to do it, just do it right. So it's up, got one header out, getting ready to pull all of this so that I can get the other one out. You can still see this bearing is just coated, and I'm not real happy with how much friction material is in there. I'm dying to see what that clutch looks like. Remember, we had this adjusted almost all the way out. I just cracked it now. And for anybody that's curious how this looks, see there's a Z-bar up there. Hopefully you can see the Z-bar. That's the piece up here. It connects to your clutch rod up there. Comes over to the ball. That's either going to be in the bell housing or the block, depending on your setup. And then there's a adjustment rod and a return spring, to keep, because otherwise this could just pop out and fall out, if you were moving fast. So that just keeps this in. All of that can move, and then when you hit the clutch, this pushes this in. These little ears on the pressure plate deform, and it decouples the friction disc from the flywheel. And of course the friction disc, you can see, is splined in there, and that's what drives the input shaft on the transmission. So I'm getting ready to pop all that out before I start pulling this. Been pulling some spark plugs as I go, and I want to show them all at once because we've got a discussion to have. Well, time sure flies when you're having fun. It's already 1:30. Finally got both headers out, and that gasket had started leaking. You can see everything's just black, but we know that everything's rich. So now that we have everything down and out, I want to talk about something I'm not real happy about. And I haven't figured out how I'm going to do a compression test at this point because we're a little behind the curve. But I don't know how well you can see it. Let me get some light. Number 8, it's got a lot of oil on it. In fact, that whole bank is a little oily. But number 8 is definitely not the same as the rest. So if you look here, and that crud there, that was on it. Not dropped or anything. These plugs are pretty easy to get at. You can see the rest of them, for the most part, burning about as good as you're going to expect with this cam and everything. Number 1 definitely has a little compression leak, I'm thinking. You can definitely see a little oil or a little something going on. So that one could just be a valve stem seal. I mean, it could be that simple. That one I'm really worried about a ring. That's a lot of oil considering how short a time these plugs have been in. Just a couple months, and makes me worried. So I think I'm gonna have to see if I can find a big enough drill when she's on a stand to spin her over and try to do a compression test. At least I'll be able to do it with the fuel system off, so we'll be wide open. But I got a feeling that if I do a wet and a dry on number 8, I'm going to see a giant difference. So just not sure if I can actually do that with a drill or if I'll have to bolt that sucker to it and go for it from there. That may also happen. But yeah, I'm going to want to know. I really don't want to pull heads on this motor, but we got to take a look. We now have the clutch out, and you can see that is scored. So that's not a happy, but we should be able to get it refinished though. But yeah, that is definitely scored. The cage is really wobbly in this thing. Although I also not a giant fan of roller pilots in these old cars. I will be replacing this with a bushing. It will last a lot longer because when this dies, that becomes shrapnel in here. But just look at all the clutch material. And I haven't really looked at it yet, but we will go look at the clutch plate in just a second. I am feeling around for the offset because I was told this is a 383, and I got to tell you, I don't feel an offset in this flywheel, So if it is a 383, it's internally balanced. Yeah, I can't really see an offset on the balancer either. So if it is a stroker, it's internal. So, you know, which, you know, I've done that too, so works fine. But yeah, this definitely chattery, definitely worn in. I haven't actually looked at this. I just moved it over, set it down, and grabbed the camera. So one, you can see in the bell housing, it is garbage. The throw out is filthy. It's really stiff. So obviously we're replacing that. All right, okay. Yeah, we're down to the rivets. In fact, a couple, not too much longer, and wouldn't have mattered. We'd have been getting a new flywheel anyway. But you can see this is just gone. This is glass. All right, let's see a pressure plate. That's hot and bad too. Oh yeah, this clutch is gone. This clutch is completely gone. And that explains a lot. So, noticing it's a puck style, you know, you can see it's just these little pucks. I thought I saw a Luke designator on the pressure plate, but honestly, I was mostly worried about not dropping it. So, okay, let's see here. What do we got there? That looks like Luke. So, not a bad aftermarket, but I think we can probably come up with something a little better for this application. Clutch is completely worn out. So, yeah, we knew we were going to find some problems there. And that's part of why we had to adjust her out so far, but also why the engagement is you either are engaged or you aren't. These are just sliding, just slipping and slipping. So, all right. In a few minutes, I'm going to jack the engine up a little bit, block her, and I've got my flywheel tool out because I was popping those bolts. I think I'm just going to pop the flywheel off now. It's a lot easier when I've got the car to fight against than trying to do it while it's on chains later. So I will turn the camera back on then. Taking a break for a little bit. Decided better start draining that. You know, it always takes a little time. Okay, let's break the vacuum and see if any more comes out. So, although this radiator wasn't overly full, you know, I think I'd pointed that out before. But when we drop the lower, more will come out. That's the way that always works. So, hopefully this afternoon we can get the fuel system pulled, get the carb off of there, get the dizzy out, start kind of unbolting where the wiring's going, get some of this crap out of the way. It's a bit to do here. Oh, there's that Z-bar from before and the socket that it rides on. Because engine moves, you don't want that to be fixed. So yeah, she'll keep dripping for a while. So we're going to take a little bit of a break. Shop Dog wants to go outside. Maybe go get his sister. Getting a little closer to getting this pulled. Got a pan down there collecting both coolant. The one down there now is collecting any fuel or oil or anything that spills as I'm working. Just kind of getting everything pulled here. So just got to pull this hose and these two hoses. And I think, oh, and of course one more engine mount bolt. And then I think that's not going to be too bad to pull up. I think I'm still going to pull the rad first just to give me some swing room. I'd hate to destroy it because apparently it is enough to do the job. So, yeah, and you can see it's always a mess under here. But I have a feeling between that carburetor that used to leak on there, some other issues as far as pressurization, and that thermostat housing leaking, I don't think it's ever going to dry up. So we're going to have to clean that up and reseal everything nicely. Better for worse, we're getting close to snagging this. We're not happy about it. Every time I take on something like this, I find a can of worms. That number 8's got me really concerned. How bad would that valve stem seal have to be to draw that much oil that fast? versus knowing that this thing was raining gas, and I probably washed the cylinder on number 8, which means the rings aren't sealing. It's the most likely answer, but well, we'll keep looking. Always fun doing this on a lift, but we're almost there already, so no problem at all. Wrapping up for today. The engine is out. The car is obviously sitting a little proud suddenly. And you can see just, I don't understand all these extra holes. Down there even, there's holes. So I'm going to have to clean those up and get rid of those holes, because nothing should be going through the firewall there. That's an area to bring a lot of moisture in. If you're going to do holes, do them up high and put grommets on them. Seal things off as best you can. Look at that. I love having wires, just bare wires going through drilled holes. That's always a recipe for trouble. So we just got fuel line clamped for now. I don't know how much fuel is in the tank. I'll drain it later. Yeah, we got a lot done. There's that Z-bar again. I will pull all that out and clean it up, but I've got to undo the clutch rod. And besides, what are the odds of the seal for the clutch rod being any good at this point? But we'll deal with that when we pull the booster, because really, because the wiring is back in there, it is a lot easier if that brake booster isn't in my way. It just makes it a lot easier. May even pull the column. Haven't decided on that yet, because I don't have to do what I'm doing, but because it's not a tilt column, it may just be in my way. So we'll deal with that when we pull the floor. I got to pull that coil. I got to get all this mess out of here. I still got to figure out how I'm getting that thing out of there. Got to figure out how it's even mounted, that vacuum pump, that noisy thing. I found an overflow reservoir in here, so I put it over there. We'll do something a little nicer than that. We'll do one that'll actually refill. That was just being used as a dump. It could never refill the way it was configured. So that is probably why this was low on water, not coolant, water. Definitely only rusty water in that cooling system. So, in fact, you can even see this is aluminum and it's rusty. You know, that's just rust deposits. So I'm going to have to wash the block out. We pulled the plugs and a lot of rusty water came out there. And you can see this engine's just so rich. But of course it is. This cam is crazy. Now you can get a good look. And that was even after we tried to clean it this summer under here. One of the problems I have with these air gap things, that and squirrels. You know, squirrels and mice like to live under those. If you park them outside for a couple days, you'll come back and be full of acorns and crap. So, still got to pop the water pump off. Gonna have to pull pulleys, the damper, all of that. We'll get all that. That won't be too big a deal. We still actually have the rocker and the push rod out there, sitting over there by the transmission. But once we knew this had to come out, there was really no point in dilly-dallying. Just get it out. You know, just like everything. Once you know something, you better just address it. It's a lot of work to do this again later. The only upside is suddenly, anytime Bartley wants to come up and clean stuff, this will get a lot better. It's winter in Minnesota, so we're not going to be able to push it out and just really pressure wash it. But he will be able to get in here just like they did last fall with the Catalina. You know, you could get this a lot cleaner. You know, we'll get some more drip pans and we'll throw under here and just let them go to town. And this will get a lot better. Still got to pull the dash, got to pull the wiring out in there, but I am just filthy. And, you know, it's the day after Thanksgiving. I'm not feeling it anymore. My back is definitely getting a little sore. I'm just happy to have that sitting down. I'm so disappointed, but I really think that number 8 either has a bad ring or because this thing was leaking fuel before it came here. And look, you know, with the way an engine sits, that particular cylinder probably got fuel washed pretty bad. And of course, that'll just wipe the crosshatch right out of it. So, I don't know, we gotta figure out how we're going to address all this yet. We haven't even looked all that deep. Just spitballing the worst cases here. That's the one that's got me the most concerned. There's really no point in doing any of this work and leaving a hurt motor. So we definitely got to check on that. So maybe when we get her on a stand, we'll look at doing some compression testing or something, or maybe finally break down and deal with a leak down or something. But we'll get it solved. Everything is solvable. It's just time and money and work. So that's going to be the end of the Bent69 today. Actually, probably for the whole weekend, because, well, in the United States, we just had Thanksgiving, which means now it's Christmas. So the wife has already put her foot down, and tomorrow I am starting Christmasing, and that's just the way that is. We'll be putting Christmas stuff up. So you can see at least the gear is still there. That always makes me feel better. That plug's got me really, really worried. Maybe it's nothing, but it still makes me concerned. Oddly enough, I'm happy to see that this clutch is destroyed, because that explains some things. And I really do think we'll get that rebuilt without too much trouble. I will look into some measurements for how wide that should be, because boy, those feel awful knife edged. And you know, obviously clutch job, new throwout bearing and everything will be part of that. So that takes care of that throwout bearing I wasn't happy with. The fuel pump's off. There's that weird jug, and I've pulled that carburetor from off my floor back out, and so now it's just back on my bench. So this is the carb that was originally on the Bent69. In fact, I haven't even done anything with it yet. It just has been really low priority. So it's still sitting here, and you can just see, look at all the fuel. So, you know, this is the one I put together out of some parts on the floor. It's not as caked, you know, not as many backfires or any of those issues, but still not ideal for this setup at all. Honestly, nothing would have been ideal. That should have had a Dominator on it and a guy going and doing bracket racing. That's what should be on that. But we'll see. We'll see how this all comes out. So we'll make it better. It's going to be a good car. So that's it for Bent69 tonight.